Welcome back, welcome back. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the talks, y'all. How are y'all doing on this lovely, amazing day? I have a really, really interesting talk. And before I even continue, let me say one more thing. Welcome to Sage Talks, where spirituality meets baddie, okay? And now that I said that, I have a really, really interesting conversation that I want to talk about. And I'm really happy to talk about this because I don't typically talk about like celebrity drama on this channel that much. But I do believe that this particular conversation has a lot to do with the audience who I serve on this channel, who I speak to, who I engage with all the time. And I think that this conversation will be the utmost valuable conversation that many of you guys will hear in a very long time. And if you haven't noticed, this conversation is about Megan Thee Stallion and Klay Thompson, and how their relationship just ended recently. Now, I want to kind of foreshadow what the conversation will be about and how sex can ultimately be the downfall of your relationship. Any romantic relationship that you're in, situationship, it will be the downfall of your relationship if you don't understand certain aspects of it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And before we get into that conversation, I want to start by giving like a preface of it all. Um if you know Megan Thee Stallion, like I do, I grew up with Megan. You know, Megan came out around the time that I was in college, and she was really growing. You know, she started off, at least where I found her, is with one of her freestyles where she was on the roof rapping with people. And around that time where Megan was really growing, her entire brand was focused on sex, sexy, twerking, drinking, having fun, being a P. She had a lot of sexually focused, physically focused branding, right? And she has some other positive branding like clean environment, safe sex, all of these things as well that she had. But her core brand was I'm from Houston, I'm thick, I can twerk, and I like to have sex and drink. Like that was her whole brand. And growing up with that, being a young woman, growing up with that, it kind of was promoted to the audience. And I'm not going to say that that was good or bad, but I will say that that was the larger scheme of what was being promoted to her audience, which was predominantly young black women. And I think that she wasn't the only one who had that branding of being sexually expressive, sexually free, having sex with whoever you want to, whenever you want to have fun, right? It was a lot more, it was a lot of women having that brand promoted, but that was her core brand. That's where she grew, that's where she was successful, all the things. And so that was Megan. And I do believe her brand has shifted as she's gotten older. You know, I want to include that she also, her brand was being a hot girl, being a smart baddie, because she also graduated. You know, she had a spectrum of her brand, which made her so appealing because she's this baddie, but she's so goal oriented and she has all these things going on, like all of that, right? And so, on the opposite spectrum, Klay Thompson, from what I'm seeing in the media, his brand is basketball. He's in the NBA. I don't know much about basketball, what he play, what he do, who knows. But I do know that about 10 years ago, he was exposed by an ex-girlfriend, because he left a journal at her home where this journal exposed his inner thoughts and inner workings about his life. He exposed what it was like being an NBA, what it was like to be a young, successful man with a lot of options. And he basically talked about being sexually free as well. He wanted to have sex with multiple women. He was most likely cheating on the woman that he was with, which is why she exposed him. And he was openly talking about being a hoe in a very kind of like sarcastic way. Like he was like hooping over everything, HOE, whole life, and I'm definitely gonna be on that whole life this weekend, you know, but that implies two different whole lives. You know, the whole life of being a basketball player, but the whole life of also being sexually active with multiple women. in different states, different zip codes, all the things, right? And people have talked about how Klay is not as open. He doesn't communicate about his personal life as much, which is probably why he journals a lot. So I can imagine that a woman who would be around him wouldn't expect for him to be who he is, because I wouldn't imagine that he would be as open and communicative about the lifestyle that he lives with, women. So you have these two people who come together, Megan Thee Stallion and Klay Thomas, where Megan Thee Stallion is very sexually and physically focused, and Klay Thomas is also very sexually and physically focused. And you have these people where they're both, I found out that they're both Aquariuses. And so if you know anything about astrology and synastry, when you have two people with who share a similar sun sign, they're going to find similarities in how they express themselves. So I can only imagine that both Megan and Thomas looked at each other and saw themselves in each other for whatever reason that could be. But mainly, I can only imagine that they saw similarities in their sexual lifestyle, in the way that they express themselves, even in that aspect of their lives, outside of other things. And with me, I'm only assuming because I don't know this part for sure. Everything else, facts before. But this part that I'm about to say, I'm only assuming that when they began their relationship, which we know she started posting him about a year ago. When they begin their relationship, they probably started having sex very soon. How they solidified their relationship, we don't, at least I don't know. I didn't do my research to see if there was a will you be my girl post or anything like that, right? But they probably started having sex very quickly. And with that, I need this is the topic that we're going to talk about, is sex, right? And how being a spiritual woman, how what you can learn from this relationship. So you have this man who probably is not as communicative. Megan is very expressive. Megan is very dominant as well. And then he probably has an inner dominance, but I can only imagine that he has a very suave, smooth, like calm, cool demeanor where he probably is not as communicative or outwardly dominant, right? And so I can only imagine Megan claiming this man very quickly. Again, this is just my assumptions at this point right now. I can only imagine her claiming him very quickly. And I wonder if she did any research on the man before she had sex or even afterwards. And I want to say I don't think the research afterwards would have been that supportive to her, but maybe before. And I'm going to say why I don't think after research is going to be supportive after having sex with him. Because if she would have realized that, oh, this man has cheated on all of his women and has been exposed, um, he openly in his journal admitted that he is going to be a hoe and he enjoys that lifestyle, even though it's a dissonance with him. He doesn't feel fully comfortable being a hoe. He doesn't respect himself for living that whole life, but he has that option and he's having fun and it's addictive. He didn't say addictive, he said exhilarating, something like that. It's something like that, exhilarating, which an exhilarating feeling can be an addictive feeling. And that's something that people cannot easily let go of, right? I don't care if it was 10 years ago, 1 year ago. If that was something that was not managed, handled, talked through with therapy, figured out, and tested over and over again, it's not going to be solved. People are going to continue to chase that exhilarating feeling. So, with, let me gather my thoughts real quick so we can stay on track. We're talking about two people who are heavily sexually focused. Now you have these two people who probably had sex very early in their relationship, and for some odd reason, he starts bringing her around his family. Megan, being a young black Southern woman who is probably very caring to her loved ones, start playing house, playing wife. And to me, what it seems like is she really liked this man for whatever reason, and she wanted to prove herself to him through the way that she loves. So she's cooking for the man. I heard they bought a house together. A lot of silly things that you shouldn't do for a boyfriend. Cooking for the family, the whole, like cooking for the whole family. I think it was for Thanksgiving or something. Proving herself to him. Megan carries a lot of dominant masculine energy that she has not yet. I don't think she's come to terms with how masculine she is in her energy, even though she's physically feminine and very beautiful, right? When you have sex with a man as a woman, there are hormones that are released, chemicals that are released in your body and in your mind. Even for men, same with men, but it's a little different, a man and a woman. A man releases dopamine more than a woman. They release a little oxytocin and things like that, but majority of the chemicals being released is dopamine. So imagine being in a race and then you win the race. That's kind of how a man's mind is working. It's like, oh my God, I finally got it. Boom. It's like that little bit of joy that happens when you finally get what you want or you finally achieve after whatever. But for a woman, dopamine is released, but more often oxytocin is released when a woman has sex. And so what that means is that more often a woman is bonding, physically bonding with a man. She's feeling closer to him. She's feeling more connected to him. Whereas on the other end, the man, he has sex and he's like, I just won a race. It's like confetti is popping off in his mind, right? So that's two different experiences having sex. Now, a woman can most definitely have sex and not be attached to a man. Like, it's definitely possible. But in this case, we know for sure that Megan was very attached to her man. And so, as a spiritual woman, you really have to learn some of these things watching other people suffer. And it's so unfortunate that Megan had to learn through this because once Megan, even if Megan figured out about his past relationships after she had sex with him, she's already chemically bonded to this man. And I know many of you women probably have felt this way before because when you bond to a man, oh, I forgot to mention this, your logical mind for both men and women severely decreases when you have sex, right? So for a woman, when you have bonded to this man, you've had sex with this man, y'all are bonded, your logic is out the window. Many times you don't have the opportunity to be as logical when you are sexually active with a man unless you have very very strong clear boundaries about what you do and don't want to experience in your relationships, right? So even if she heard about all of these things, and I know y'all probably experienced this before, I saw your friend do this where you like, well, didn't you say he like ran his ex over and like stole all her money? That's a little extreme. But you know that one friend that will be like, well, he's changed. He's not gonna do that with me. That was like 10 years ago. And it's like, oh, okay. Why? It's because their logical brain is no longer there. Now add on highly insecure, add on lack of family around you, lack of security, lack of safety. Add all of these onto that and think about what happens in that relationship and what people put up with. You know, thank God Megan came out and said, this is what's happening and I'm not putting up with it and I'm moving on. That's an amazing image to keep for her and to promote for young women out there to say, I don't care who you are, I have standards and I'm going to keep them. But I really want Megan to come out and say, hey, sex is not all of that. It is when you with the right person. But to be realistic, when you're dating a man, and this is something I wish I would have learned sooner. I grew up in that era where sex was promoted, and you know, having sex whenever, however, whoever you want to have fun, that was being promoted, and I didn't have anybody in my ear saying, this is how you should really maneuver through your relationships. This is the safest, this is the most stable way to have a better relationship with the man, right? As I get older, I learn the importance of having sex with the right man, because sex is one of those things where it's fun in the moment, but in the long term, especially when you're chemically bonding with the man, you cannot help it to chemically bond with the man when you're having sex. And when you're bonding with a man who is not bonded to you, that is not a happy feeling. That's where situations come from. That's where limerence can come from. That's where all of these emotions, where it's like, well, I really want this, but I'm not getting what I want, and he doesn't want me, and it's like you're chasing after a man. That's where all these negative emotions come from, is because a lot of times you're having sex too early. And so for every spiritual woman, you have to learn to be sexually disciplined. Like, if I can be so for real, sexual discipline is not something that's talked about. Waiting until this man has proven that he wants to be with you, that he wants to care for you, right? All the things that meets whatever your relationship needs are. And as a young woman, you probably don't know what your relationship needs are because you don't know who you are. And that's okay. But I can only harp on not giving yourself to so many people, or just to just anybody who you have not solidified a strong, healthy foundation in relationship with. Where that man is telling you, this is what we are, this is what we're doing, right? Where you're not having to ask that man, well, what are we doing? What are we, are we going to go on a date? Right? And so with this whole Megan Thee Stallion and Klay Thomas thing, I really want y'all to understand the importance of not getting so involved with the man so early, because you won't think logically. It's going to be difficult, and it may take a lot of pain and back and forth before you can really end that relationship. And it's better to just not fully get involved in it, instead of be fully involved in it and have to accept the pain of ending it, right? Allow a man to show you who he is, and do your research on the man before giving yourself to him. I can only imagine that if Megan did some research on this man and found out his journal and all the women he was with and the type of women he used to date before her, that she probably would have been like, oh, I don't know. Or she could have been like, well, that was so long ago, I'll give him a chance. But it still would have been something that she compared and maybe questioned about him. Who knows? So as a young, not as a young, I don't care how old you are listening to this, but as a spiritual woman, outside of just sexual discipline and waiting to have sex with the man and not allowing the physical to be so important in your relationship. And I mean also, oh, he's so fine. Oh, he got abs. Oh, he's so tall. Not allowing that to dictate how you show up in your relationship, because even that can cause people to have chemical imbalances. The looking at a man and be like, oh my God. If you insecure and you base your worthiness on a man's appearance, that's, ooh, baby, you got a lot to figure out, right? But yeah, so the sex thing, spiritual women need to be sexually disciplined and to take relationships slow. That's the second thing I really want y'all to think about. Because again, we've known them. She started posting him like a year ago, like a soft launch. We don't know how long they really been together. But taking in a relationship slow. Megan Thee Stallion was also featured on one of those shows. I think it was Love Island. And we talked about this in one of our lives a while ago about how television shows like Love Island and like all those other dating shows, they promote and market quickly falling in love with people. They promote these games that have men and women intimate very quickly. And of course, Megan Thee Stallion is one of the perfect people to promote on one of those shows because that's her brand is sex, right? So you have a sexually liberated woman who is being promoted on a show that focuses on pushing sexual intimacy quick, falling in love quick, being in a relationship quick, instead of building a slow foundation and getting to know each other, right? So, what is Megan like? What's the correct word? Subconsciously? I don't think that's the correct word that I'm trying to use, but I'm going to use that word. What is Megan subconsciously promoting? Without speaking it out loud, what is she promoting? What is her brand? What is she manifesting? And with her being such a pillar in this community, she's an amazing woman in the things that she's conquered and she's overcome, and what she promotes as a woman, how successful she is and how hardworking. She's amazing. But that aspect of her is what keeps pulling her back, keeping her in the media. She has a hard time being alone. Of course, she's been through a lot of trauma, and it's understandable. She has a hard time taking relationships slow and not becoming sexually active so quick. All of these things. And it's difficult when you are constantly surrounded by media that's telling you, hurry up and fa. That's what the kids be saying. Hurry up and fa, all that. No. As I get older, I realize if you do that, the more that you do that to yourself, the more you are self sabotaging. You say you want a relationship, but then you go out and just give yourself to a man that you was just so interested in one night, and it's just not okay. And it leads to this where it's like, oh, you're cheating, you telling me you can't be polyamorous and I've done all this stuff for you. Well, baby, he's been saying this for 10 years. Every single woman, I'm not gonna say every, but the women that has who he's been with has been saying the same thing, babe. Men don't change for anybody but themselves. So that's another thing as a spiritual woman. Don't think that you're any different. A man's pattern is a man's pattern, and you have to be realistic. What are you seeing? What are the facts? What is on the paper? We cannot be so delusional that we no longer trust what is being physically shown to us in real life. And I'm not going to even continue this conversation because I feel like I've said enough. Sexual discipline, take your time in relationships, don't allow the media to promote something that is not the natural order of this world. We have to start following the natural order and stop allowing I'm being funny when I say this, but it's actually real, like demonic shows that are only here for their own desires, their own greed, the money. They're promoting what people want to see and the people are consuming it, but it's like consuming sugar. It's quite literally. It's literally consuming sugar. And I'm not going to get into the effects of sugar, but if you know, you know. As a spiritual woman, you really have to go within yourself. Be okay being by yourself and not being in a romantic relationship. Be okay with getting to know yourself. Be okay with dating yourself until a man is able to date you in a way that is appropriate, respectable. Be with a man that respects himself, because even Klay himself said that he didn't, in a way, he didn't directly say it, but in a way he admitted through his journals that he does not respect himself. Be with a respectable man who respects himself and respects you. And don't allow y'all's relationship to be so sexually focused. I mean, we can even talk about that whole Mary conversation. Her relationship was initially focused on sex. If you stay in a relationship focused on sex, that man is just as sexual. And he's not going to be wanted to be just as sexual with just you. And that's the end of that, y'all. I hope y'all enjoyed this conversation, all my spiritual women. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I love you. Talk to you later. Bye.